Hi everybody, I'm Laura Nelkin and I am excited to show you March's Lola's Choice kit, Otayski. Lola's Choice is my small knitted kit club. Lola is my alter ego. For those of you who don't know her, I let her design six kits and designs a year. She has a great time doing them. Sometimes I don't like her ideas and I change them a bit, but I am thrilled with Otayski for March. Otayski is a 2-color headband that is worked in the round and then grafted together in the middle with a twist. I do this in a really fun way that I'm excited to show you in this video. I'm gonna go over a few different tips and tricks in this video, show you the yarn that I used, teach you how to do color work if you haven't done that before, show you how to do that twist at the end, and a few other things that you might not be familiar with. But first off, I think it's fun to tell you why Otayski is called Otayski. And some of you know that I love to Nordic ski. I actually love to ski more than I like to knit, but I'm like a little quiet about that. Part of that is because you can only really ski at certain times of the year, and knitting I can do anytime, right? So I was headed out for a solo ski, and what I always do before I hit the trails is I just text my husband Max and tell him I'm skiing, and I tell him where the car is parked, and then I text him when I come back just in case something happens. It's like a safety thing. And I texted him that I was going out on a ski and I was wearing the headband for the first time, and he wrote me back and said Otayski, like kind of saying okay ski, like that. And of course Lola was like, that's the best name ever. So that's how Otayski became to be called Otayski, in case you were wondering. We definitely kind of make up words in our family, and I find with the Lola's Choice kits I love to kind of create new words for the designs when I'm naming them. So I want to show you the yarns that I use for Otayski. The first yarn is Camper, and that is a yarn from Kelborn Woolens. They are a woman-owned company in Philadelphia. It's 100% wool that is a really great workhorse fingering weight yarn that is still incredibly soft and comfortable next to the skin. And then the other yarn that I used is a bobbin of Plied yarn from Baltimore, and my daughter Bella has been working for Plied while she's finishing up college, so she probably wound these bobbins for us. And Plied is a collaboration between Plied Yarn Company in Baltimore and Harrisville Mills in New Hampshire. So the dyeing happens in Baltimore and the spinning happens in New Hampshire. And it's a really intriguing 2-ply dyed yarn that I think you're gonna have a really good time playing with. There is enough yarn on both the bobbin and the skein to make the large size with a fair amount left over. So don't worry about running out of yarn while you're working on Otayski. I think you're gonna really enjoy both of these yarns and end up wanting to use them in another project in the future. Okay, let's jump right into how Otayski is constructed and what you need to do to cast on and get it on your needles. So Otayski starts with a provisional cast on, and it is worked in the round in a tube in Colorwork. Once you finish all of the color work in the tube, you end up knitting your stitches together on one end of the Otayski to make a flat rectangle, and then you go back to the beginning to that provisional cast on, unzip the provisional cast on, and work a second flat rectangle going out. After I show you how to work the color work, I'll show you exactly what I mean, because I know those words might not make sense, but on my needles it'll make a ton of sense, and it's very easy to do. You'll want to get gauge for working Otayski. Gauge is about 8 stitches to the inch blocked. You can just cast on with the Camper and knit a few inches and then lay that down flat and block it and check your gauge. I would do that before you start to make sure that you're on, just to make sure that your Otayski fits and you're happy with that, because it's no fun when your headband is too tight, and it is no fun when your headband is too loose. I do give you 3 different sizes of Otayski to choose from. You can just measure your head and make sure that you choose a size that's about 1 inch or 1.5 inches smaller than your head size, so that it grabs on a little bit. You don't want it kind of sliding down into your eyes while you're outside in the snow or walking the dog or whatever you're gonna do in your Otayski. It would be really annoying if mine was like sliding down in my eyes while I was doing this video for you. So that little bit of tightness is really important. Okay, so I'm all ready to show you how to do a provisional cast on. And the reason that you're doing a provisional cast on is you want to end up with live stitches to go back and pick up later. The first thing to do when you make a provisional cast on is to make a loop and then take that loop and put it onto a crochet hook that is about the same size gauge as your knitting needle. And then you'll have the loop on the crochet hook, and you will hold your needle parallel to your crochet hook and bring your yarn underneath your needle, and then bring the yarn over the needle and the crochet hook and pull that yarn through. And now you have one provisional stitch on your needle. So I'll continue on like that, pulling through. So I just bring the yarn over and pull through and over and pull through. You're going to continue on like that until you have 56 stitches on your needle. I'm going to do a few less than that because you don't need to watch me do 56 stitches. And then when you are done and you have all the stitches you need, just single crochet a few extra loops and then cut your yarn. And I do have scissors right here. I'm always proud of myself when I remember my scissors. And cut your yarn and then pull that end through. And those single crochet chains will be your reminder that that is the end that you're gonna unzip from when you go to get your live stitches when you're done working the body of Otayski. So after you have your provisional stitches on your needles, you're gonna grab your working yarn and you're gonna knit one row with your working yarn, and then you're gonna join into the round. This is all written in your pattern, so you can jump to your pattern and follow along and make sure that you understand what's happening. I always suggest that everybody sit down and read their pattern at least once, if not twice, before casting on. That will save you a whole world of having to rip out your knitting if you take the time to read your pattern before you jump right in and cast on. I'm completely guilty of just casting on and not reading patterns, and then even my own patterns, and having to rip out and start again. So wouldn't be the first person to do that. Okay, the next thing to show you is Colorwork. I'm excited to show you that. Okay, I'm ready with round 5 on my needles. If you haven't worked Colorwork before, or if you have worked Colorwork before, I definitely suggest reading on page 2 in the pattern, because I give you some tips and tricks to make sure you have success with Otayski. If you are working from the chart, you're gonna read every round from the right to the left, but I also give you written instructions if you don't enjoy reading charts. There are a few tips to keep in mind when working with your contrast color, the biggest of which is to make sure that you have a nice long float when you're going to work the stitch. If your float is too tight, it's going to end up pulling up the fabric and puckering it, and you're not going to be happy with your finished Otayski. So I'm giving myself a nice long float here, and then with my yarn held to the left, my contrast color to the left, I'm going to go ahead and knit one. And then I'm going to kind of drop my contrast color and go ahead and work with my main color until I get to the next stitch with the contrast color. It is not necessary to cut your yarn in between rounds. I believe it's 7 and 17 in this pattern. What happens with Otayski is because you're working in the round, the contrast color is all on the inside of the headband, so you won't be seeing it from the outside at all. If you were working this kind of color work with, let's say you were working a sweater or a hat or something, and those floats were going to be potentially caught by your finger, you would want to be catching them kind of halfway through the round. But since the floats end up completely trapped on the inside of the fabric, there's no reason to capture them. So you can see when I got to this next color stitch, I'm gonna kind of slow down for you, I dropped my main color and I left it to the right over here. And then I went and I got my contrast color, held that to the left, but I really wanna make sure that that float is nice and loose, almost exaggeratedly loose. You don't want it tight like that. So make sure it's really like loose and you've got a lot of room there. And if I show you again the inside, you'll see how loose those floats are going from stitch to stitch. So that is the main trick for working color work in Otayski, is keep it loose. Keep your knitting and those floats really loose on the inside. You can definitely go back if you're not happy with how something looks and kind of pull things up a little bit or pull them out if you need to before you get too far along in the pattern. That is really easy to do. So there's kind of moments to check yourself and fix things up. Those are your color work tips and tricks. Feel free to ask questions below if you have any about it. I know some of you are going to be brand new color work knitters when you're working this. Others of you have probably worked a lot of color work in the past, and it'll be fun to see what you all think of using this kind of long float technique. Okay, we've worked the color work. We've gotten to the other end of our Otayski, and I do have one here for you that is flat, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So you've worked in the round right here, and then you're gonna end up working your end where you hold your stitches together and knit two together across so that you have this flat section of stockinette stitch on the end. And I have a little swatch over here that shows you what that looks like on one end already done. And then I thought it would be fun to undo the provisional cast on this end and work that together and show you one thing where I think you could make a mistake if you're not paying attention. So let me just grab some needles and grab my yarn, and I'm gonna show you how to do this. I'm excited to do this because I don't think I've showed unzipping a provisional cast on in a while. So here I am getting ready to unzip. I'm looking for the end of the provisional cast on that has the extra single crochet chains, because that is the end that I'll be able to unzip from easily. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and start pulling out this chain and taking my live stitches and trying not to split them as I do this, and taking those live stitches and putting them onto my needle. I got my first one right there, and what I like to do is come into the stitch right below the provisional cast on from the back to the front and then undo the chain. And I come in from the back to the front and I undo the chain, back to the front, undo the chain, back to the front, undo the chain. And I know right here that I have 12 stitches on my needles, so I'm gonna put 6 onto one needle, and then I'm gonna kind of turn my work around because I'm on the second half, and I'm gonna go grab another needle, back to front, and you can see I'm just kind of pulling it out as I undo it. Very easy. I know provisional cast-ons make some people nervous. I think they're rather magical. And that's 6 again. And then you should just be able to pull out the rest of your provisional cast on. And now I've got all of my live stitches on my needle. The next step here, before you knit two together from the front needle and the back needle, is to make sure that you have the right side facing you of your Otayski, so that if I started right here and worked together on this side and I had the wrong side facing and I knit two together, I wouldn't end up with my stockinette stitch rectangles with the same side forward. So make sure that you've got your right side facing right there. Go ahead and grab your working yarn, grab your needle, and then go ahead and knit one stitch from the front needle together with one stitch from the back needle across. And when you're doing this,
You might find that it's a little tight as you start. You can see that I had a hard time getting that first stitch going. And I'm just gonna get in there and pull that off. And I am literally just knitting one stitch from the front needle, one stitch to the back needle, together, across. So I've got 12 stitches on my needles, and at the end of this, I'm gonna have 6. You will have started out with 56 stitches, and you'll end up with 28 stitches. And then once you do this, you are all set up to finish working that second rectangle, working in that direction out. And now it is time to sew your Otayski together so that you get this fun little twist at the top. Okay, I'm super lucky that one of my test knitters, Susie, let me borrow her finished Otayski so I could show you how to graft it together without me knitting another one of them. So thanks, Susie. So this is Susie's Otayski. You can see that it is flat. What I highly suggest that you do before you go to sew it together is to block it flat. It's much easier to block Otayski flat. You can still block it once it has the twist in it, but just take a moment, wet it in some warm water, and then let it dry overnight sitting flat. You can use your ironing board or something that it'll dry quickly on. Do that, and then go ahead and it's time to sew it together. The pattern has you leave a nice long tail. I've already got a tapestry needle on my tail ready to go. And what you want to do, and just bear with me while I show you this, is you want to take your Otayski and have your wrong sides facing up so that you fold one end just like that. So your right sides are together and your wrong sides are out. And then let me just kind of move that out of the way. And then I'm gonna grab my other side, and you can see that it doesn't have a twist in it right now. Everything's laying flat, and I'm holding it with the right sides together, wrong sides out, and I've kind of got two halves like this. And now you're going to make a wool sandwich, which is super yummy. And you're gonna take this end and fit it into there, and then take this side and fit it into there, and then there'll be a moment where you just kind of have to wiggle things around so that this end is right up there and this end is right up there, and you've got this yummy little wool sandwich. And then if you already have your tapestry needle threaded on there, you're just gonna take that tapestry needle and go through and sew all the way across, making sure that you're getting all 4 layers when you are sewing across there. I love doing this. Sewing it together for you, Susie. So you can see that's nice and tight. Keep your stitches close together so there's no gapping or holes. Make sure that you grab all 4 layers as you go across. It helps if you use a needle that has a little bit of a bent tip at the end, just because you can really kind of manipulate it to grab. I'm trying to get in there and make sure I'm getting that corner. And one more like that, and one more like that. And then you'll just kind of weave it in a tiny bit more, and then you can trim your end, and then you'll see that you've got this lovely little twist at the top, which is so fun. I had seen headbands like this. I saw a bunch when I was in Finland, and now I know how they did it. I had no idea how that twist was made. I did see some where they were worked all in the round and then twisted together, but I found the twist to be more bulky than I enjoyed. I like it to be a little bit more flat at the top, so I figured out that way of working the 2 stockinette triangles and then sandwiching them together. So that is all of the tips and tricks I can think of that might help you knit Otayski, but certainly ask below if there's anything else that you're not comfortable with. I do have about a 40-minute video on provisional cast-ons, so if that's a brand new technique for you, you can go ahead and watch that separate video to kind of go a little bit more into depth in provisional cast-ons. I cannot wait to see your Otayskis come off your needles. I think you're gonna have a really fun time with this design. Thank you so much. Surprise! You thought this video was done. I have one more thing to show you. One of my testers, Lois, was inspired by the thrumming I started doing this winter. I made some thrum mittens, and she decided to thrum her Otayski. So of course I was like, well, that's brilliant. I want to do that too. So I have an Otayski with thrums on my needles, and I want to show you how to add a thrum to Otayski if you want to. What I did is, instead of, let me just look at this chart right here so I tell you exactly what I did correctly. Instead of starting the color work on round 5, I only did the color work on rounds 6 and that is 18. So rounds 6 and 18. And I just did the one middle stitch with a thrum instead of doing that whole little diamond of color. And for those of you who don't know what thrumming is a technique that uses a bit of fleece as a color work like lice or pop that ends up creating a really lovely insulated fabric. So I've got some fleece right here, and I'm just going to rip off a little bit of it. And what you want to do for a thrum is have a piece that's about the same thickness as the yarn that you're using, maybe a little bit thicker. So I've pulled off just a tiny little piece right here, and then you twist it a little bit just to kind of line up all those fibers and not have them pop out too much. And then I'm gonna go into the stitch that I want to have the thrum on it. I am going to put the thrum over that stitch, and then I am going to tuck the thrum down and in, and then grab my working yarn, go around the needle and pull the yarn and the thrum together so that the yarn is to the left and the thrum is to the right. And that is how you place a thrum into your knitting. Now, when I come to that on the next round, I'm gonna work both the thrum and that piece of yarn together through the back loop to twist them and open them up. And that way the thrum will stay perfectly in place. So as you can see here, if you look down, you can kind of see the thrumming already happening on the inside of my Otayski. And I think what's gonna happen is this is gonna end up making a really nice insulated, warm Otayski. I have to say I'm not on fire to finish this because I don't feel like I'm going to need it that many more times this year, but I'm sure that I'll have it finished before winter settles in the end of 2022, because it'll be great for skiing next winter. So that's just your little bonus, how to add a thrum to your Otayski.